Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK, and in today's episode / training video, we're going to talk about a couple of things. Now, the reason I'm calling it an episode is we're going to focus on XRP in today's video as of the 7th of November, 2022. I'm going to show you this chart, kind of what I'm looking for as far as targets go, stop loss, entry ideas, and so forth. The reason it's a training video is because it will have relevance in the future, because I'm going to walk you through my entire process, at least the process that I typically use when it comes to setting up a chart. What time frames do I focus on? What type of entry ideas am I looking out for? What kind of targets am I setting? What are those based off of? And what is my stop loss set at? Now, if that sounds interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Gents and ladies, no time to waste. Don't be afraid, it's time to trade. Let's start your brains like high-speed trains. Storm these days like hurricanes. It's time to save this herd this days. Put on your cape and learn the phrase. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Now, the first and very important thing that I want to go over in today's video is the importance of having a checklist. Now, in the future, you may put some things on your own personal checklist that deviate or vary from what I've got. This is my own personal checklist, but I just want to stress the importance of having a checklist that every day before you dive into any chart, whether that's the S&P 500, Bitcoin, the DXY, these are things I'll talk about in this video, but I want to stress the importance of, before you do any of that, you need to kind of check the landscape that you're going to be trading in within that given day. And how do you do that? So the first thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a whiteboard. And on this whiteboard, you're going to write down quite a few things, or at least several things. And we'll kind of jump back to this as it's relevant throughout this video. But the first thing you want to do is write down what I call my daily checklist, right? These are the things that I look at first before I even bother looking at any charts, such as the S&P 500, Bitcoin, DXY, things we're going to go over in this video. And the first two things I want to talk about that are going to be on that checklist is, number one, is there any news that has come out this day or the day that you're actually looking to trade that could influence stocks or the crypto market as a whole? And then number two, is there any news catalyst coming up within the next few days to few weeks that will likely influence, stocks or crypto. Now, keep in mind as we go through this video, I'm not going to leave you guys hanging. Make sure you check the links in the description, as some of them will pertain the links that I use to some of these things, like in this case, the site that I use to check news. Now, the next thing I do is I pull up 3 different charts, all of which are relevant to me and important as far as my trade ideas are concerned. And I want you to write these 3 charts down. And if you have a TradingView account, go ahead and load them each up on their own separate page. The first being the DXY, which is the US dollar index. It's just the strength of the US dollar. I'll explain that when we get to that chart. The second one is going to be the ES1 explanation point, is the ticker. It's the S&P 500 E-mini futures chart. I'll also explain that when we get to that. And the third chart is going to be the BTC1 explanation point, which is the CME chart for Bitcoin. And we'll also add a fourth chart just in case it was a weekend when you were possibly trading, or if the CME was closed for the day or something. Then go ahead and pull up your BTC USDT, the Binance spot chart for Bitcoin as well. So we're going to have 4 total charts all on their own pages. Now we're just going to dive into the 4 charts with a brief and quick explanation as to why these are the 4 charts that I pay attention to every day. The first is the DXY, which is the US dollar currency index. What this chart basically is just the strength of the US dollar, and the way that that's determined via this chart is it just puts it against a basket of all of the other major currencies, things like the yen, the pound, the euro, and so on, right? And one thing that we've observed, or something that has been true for the majority of history, is that when this thing on higher time frames is going up, that's generally bad for stocks, and if this thing is going down, that's generally good. Now, that's not always the case on lower time frames, but understand that it's something that I check every day, because if this thing's trending one direction, then the market's usually trending the opposite direction as it, right? And I'll explain that a little bit deeper here in a bit. Now, next one is the ES1 explanation point, or the S&P 500 E-mini futures. Now, this is basically just the S&P 500. However, the E-mini futures trades 24/7 Monday through Friday, whereas its counterpart, or the regular S&P 500, closes at like 2:30 Eastern time, right? And so reason we track this chart is because Bitcoin is so highly correlated with regular stocks now that we use a chart like the S&P 500. Some YouTubers or other traders use the NASDAQ 100. Some use the Dow Jones. I do peek at those from time to time, but primarily I focus on this S&P 500 E-mini futures. Next up, we've got the Bitcoin CME futures chart. Now this one, similar to the S&P 500, does not trade 24/7, 365. It trades basically Sunday evening, at least for where I'm at in the United States, through sometime Friday evening, and is closed for the weekend. And the reason why we put higher priority on this chart is it represents really where the big money's going in the institutions, which is price action that we can trust a little bit more than the spot trading chart. Now they do stay pretty similar, but of course when this thing closes, say for Saturday or Sunday, then that leaves us no choice but to look at the regular spot chart. But just remember that the price action on this, I put a higher priority on than I do the spot chart. And the last one we go over in the video is the Bitcoin spot chart. This is the Binance chart here on TradingView. Again, the reason why this one adds value is because if it's Saturday evening or Sunday morning, you're going to be needing to look at this chart rather than the CME chart, as this one trades 24/7, 365. All right, now's a good time to pause the video, go ahead and take a deep breath, maybe go get a drink of water, bowl of ice cream, take the dogs out for a piss, do whatever you gotta do, and understand that if you're confused now, hopefully it will get better as we progress through the video. Now, if you're wondering why we haven't jumped into the XRP chart that I talked about in the beginning of the video, patience, my friend. Just understand that trading, at least in my eyes, is a lot like going on a camping trip, if that's something you've ever done. And, if you're trying to decide where to go or what to pack, things like that, it's going to be very, very hard to do so if you haven't checked the weather forecast. And I think of our checklist or these other charts as like checking the weather for the market, so to speak. So we have an idea of what we're dealing with, what the market conditions are, what kind of news. All of these things play a role in exactly what my mindset's going to be, or how I'm going to, essentially trade these charts. So now we're back over here on the DXY chart. Now understand that my actual charting example, as far as targets, support, resistance, stop loss, all that's going to be on the XRP chart, which we'll go over shortly. I just wanted to briefly show you a already, set up chart for the DXY and kind of the ideas that I'm looking for. Really is, when it comes to the DXY chart, you're just looking for upside ideas and downside ideas on the daily or higher time frames. Again, because generally if this is going up, that's bad for stocks, and for the most part when it's going down, that's good. So of course, in this case, if I'm looking for long ideas on XRP, I'm looking for downside ideas on the DXY. And just to kind of briefly go over what we're tracking or looking out for as a potential downside idea, which will all fit together as this video goes on, for the upside ideas of XRP, would be a break of this trend line that I've spotted kind of on this DXY chart. It's been acting as support basically since the beginning of this year, late January, early February. It's bounced there once, twice, 3 times, 4 times as it's gone parabolic, and it's working on either a 5th bounce, or potentially what we're looking for is a break and a bearish retest of it flipping that current support back into resistance, and for the DXY to trend this way over the next few weeks or few months, which we have identified would likely lead to some upside in stocks, which would hopefully be Bitcoin then, of course, and XRP. Now, as we hop over to our next chart, which is the ES1 S&P 500 E-mini futures, understand that when you're looking at these charts, it's all about what kind of trade you're making as it relates to time frames. And are these short-term trades, mid-term trades, things like that? Are you trading the macro trend that's going on at the moment? Are you trying to trade the intermediate trend? And let me explain what I mean by that. So the macro trend right now on the ES1, just like the entire market, is one of a downtrend, as you've had this larger trend line up here with a high. You've had these lows. You've had a lower high, just meaning this high is lower than that high. You've got the lower low to follow, the lower high than this high to follow that, another lower low, This is a lower high than this one. And, you know, this is our kind of our first sign of potential trend reversal, but at the same time, it is still just a double bottom at the moment. Until we put in a higher high than this high, the trend remains intact to the downside. We, you know, even if we do see upside over the next few weeks, as we're discussing in this video, as we eye ideas for XRP, ultimately we may find some resistance just, you know, at this same trend line here, which would still be a lower high. And at that point, we'd be looking for yet another lower low, just keeping the overall trend, you know, intact. But then as we clear up this chart, just understand that there is the intermediate trend, which in this case, you can date back to this falling wedge. And you can see that as it put in a high and a lower high, lower low, that it broke out and that this high here was actually higher than this high. What you're looking for anytime you see a wedge like that break out is the first thing you're looking for is for the high that breaks out of it to be higher than the last high within the wedge. That was check. Then you're looking for the next low to be a higher low or a double bottom. Now this ended up being a lower low. So that is still caution because you have this low and that this low is actually a little bit lower. Now it's very close to being a double bottom, but if you just take it, you know, as technical as possible, this low is lower than that low. So ultimately what you'd be looking for right now is for the major macro trend to continue, which would just mean you'd expect some sort of a lower high than this, and then ultimately eventually a lower low. The question is the lower high what we've already put in, or is there still some room to the upside to something like right here before we roll over and put in a lower low? This is the kind of things that you're tracking, starting with the daily chart, getting it all charted out, and then moving into something like the 4-hour to kind of trade sometimes the trend within the trend, so to speak. Okay then, so now as we move over to the Bitcoin CME futures chart, I just want you to take note of something very important. Now, outside of when I'm making a video specific to the weekly time frame for Bitcoin or the daily time frame, you know, giving some macro ideas specific to Bitcoin, when I'm opening up a trade, I've already used the DXY to get kind of an idea of what I believe, you know, some macro ideas are, plan A, plan B for that. I'm tracking the ES1 of the S&P 500 for breakout ideas or breakdown ideas. In this case, I've got this yellow trend line drawn, which has been resistance once, twice, you know, had a little bull trap here, but more or less, I'm using that combined with this red horizontal line, and I'm looking for upside ideas to begin with a break and retest of that, heading up to here, and, you know, looking for downside ideas based on a rejection at this trend line and potentially moving down here for a lower low. So by the time I've moved over to the Bitcoin chart, as I'm getting ready to open up a trade on something like XRP, which we'll go over in just a second, I'm really not so worried about the higher time frames on Bitcoin because I believe, or what I've observed, is it tends to follow the, you know, ES1 in this case, or the S&P 500, which I've identified follows the DXY. So when I get over to the, you know, the Bitcoin CME futures chart, I'm more interested in lower time frames as I'm using it to identify entry ideas for whatever altcoin I'm, you know, decided to trade. Okay, another big breath. All right, so what I've identified here as we're on the 4-hour chart for the CME futures is that we had this descending triangle, which is just a series of lower highs and basically a bounce at kind of the same area or zone of support. This is a bearish pattern, something I had been tracking, has a higher probability of breaking to the downside, which is why it's a bearish pattern. However, it went against the odds, which wasn't a complete surprise based on some other things that we've been tracking over the last few weeks. However, if you were tracking this all by itself, you know, without tracking those other things, you may have actually been expecting this to break to the downside. However, it did go against the odds, broke to the upside. So what we're looking for now is retest ideas to time our entries for, in this case, XRP. And what we're looking for is, okay, it got rejected at this zone of resistance at around 21K, and now it's coming back down ultimately to test or retest this zone, which was the top side of the triangle, right? Which would be somewhere between where it recently bounced at around 20,500, maybe even as low as like 20,250, which in some of my more recent videos was an area we've been watching for as far as a breakout. And the last, my friends, we have arrived to XRP, which is the coin we'll be talking about in tomorrow's video. Yes, that's right. I'm going to throw a little curveball at you guys just so we don't have too long a video. We're going to split it up into a little 2-part series, but I wanted to leave you with one last thing for today's video, and I do hope that today's video still added some value, even though we haven't gotten into the actual coin that I'll be trading or, potentially trading, and how to set up the charts and the stop loss and support and resistance and all of that. But I'm going to leave you with one last thing in today's video, something that maybe you can write down on that whiteboard or that checklist we talked about, and that's going to be that you're going to be setting a crap ton of alerts anytime you're going to be making a trade. And there's going to be a hierarchy to those alerts, which we'll talk about more in tomorrow's video. But just know that you're going to set alerts on like the S&P 500, alerts on Bitcoin, alerts on XRP. And if you have an alert, say, go off first on XRP for a level that you're looking to enter or take profits or whatever it may be, you're going to want to see if an alert went off also on Bitcoin, which is above it, to govern or give you a bias as to whether or not it is a good time to enter. Because if you get an alert on, say, XRP, but Bitcoin hasn't set an alert off on some support level you were eyeing or a break of some resistance, that is going to make a difference on whether or not you pay attention to or put weight on the alert that went off on XRP. This will all make a lot more sense tomorrow, but just understand that alerts are your best friend. We're going to be talking about that a lot tomorrow as we discuss kind of how I enter trades. So keep that in your mind. If you don't know how to set alerts yet, that is a video I'll put out in the near future, and maybe I'll even add it into tomorrow's video. But in between now and then, if you are tracking this or paying attention, maybe Google how to set alerts on TradingView, and just understand that that's going to be one of your best friends going forward as it relates to trading. I really do hope this video was informative and helpful, and if you got any value out of the video today, can you please do me a favor on your way out? Remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one. It's TIME.